Hi there, this video is basically just an afterthought to my previous video. In the previous video I said I thought the reason ancient people used megalithic stones to build structures instead of cutting the stones into smaller, more manageable stones is because it was actually easier to move the megalithic stones than it was to cut the stones. Some people have suggested the stones were made using geopolymers, essentially just making the stones by pouring them like concrete. And although I would say that I'm open to that possibility, we don't really know for sure how they did it, but I still think it was more likely that they were cutting the stones. So with that said, I think it was less time consuming to use large stones instead of spending the time to cut the stones into many smaller stones. If you haven't seen that video, I'll link that one in the description and at the end of this video. The question here is, why did no one ever write down how to cut and move megalithic stones? I used to wonder if maybe the megalithic architects were just a select few people who closely guarded the secrets to megalith building because it was a skill that brought them wealth and prestige and they didn't want to share that knowledge with others and share the wealth. But now I think that's unlikely, mostly because I think it would be hard to keep the method a secret from all the workers actually building the structure. I suppose they could have compartmentalized the project and only showed each group of workers one specific skill in the process so that the workers would never know the whole process, but now I think that's unlikely. I now think the explanation is much simpler. I think they didn't write down how to do it because they didn't need to write it down. I think when one generation of children came of working age, they would learn how to build by watching the builders. I think it was a master and apprentice relationship. The masters would teach the apprentices how to build by showing them how to do it. And when the apprentices became the masters, they would take on their own apprentices and they taught them by showing them how to do it. So I think they all learned by on-the-job training. If anyone ever did write it down, it's never been found and was apparently lost pretty far back in history. When the time came that people started building using mud bricks instead of stone, I think people realized that building with mud bricks was faster and easier. I think the mud brick building method quickly became the norm, and people stopped building with megalithic stones since the mud bricks were less labor-intensive and probably less time-consuming. When builders stopped using megaliths after a few generations, people had probably forgotten the method their ancestors used to cut and move megaliths because no one was doing it anymore, so there was no one to watch. And since no one had written down how to do it back when they were doing it, the method was lost to time. And I think it's probably that simple. No one wrote down the method because that's not how they taught it. They taught it on the job, but when an easier method came along and no one was doing the job anymore, the knowledge was lost. What do you think? Do you think the knowledge was lost because no one thought it was important to write it down, or is there some other reason? Those are my thoughts on that. Thanks for listening.